Hey guys, Gareth from DadTV here, and today I want to talk about Bozja, specifically all of that kind of content, and why, to be honest, we kind of need more of it in FF14. But before that, I just wanted to let you know, I stream 5 times a week over on Twitch, playing FF14 and other JRPGs and cool stuff like that, so if you want to come and join me in Bozja, why not click on the link below. Okay, with that shameless plug out of the way, let's get into why I think we need more Bozjan Southern Front, more Zadnor, more of that style of content and that storyline in Endwalker, shall we? I recently did a video covering my thoughts on the Shadowbringers Relic weapon and whether or not it's actually a grind in comparison to things like the Realm Reborn relics and all those other ones that we've had over time. And kind of following on from that, I guess, is the first point in this, which is the whole thing with Zadnor and Bozja and all of that storyline is that it keeps the relic weapons completely separate from the actual content of the game in terms of the world that we're used to. So, for example, in A Realm Reborn, the relic weapons were literally relic weapons. That's why we call them that. That's where the name came from. They were relics of a bygone era of Eorzean history and legend. Everything was tied to it, and so they were like the legendary weapons that everyone would seek after because they were so powerful and so strong in history. And then Heavensward came along, and suddenly we had new relic weapons that were stronger, and the old relic weapons that we lusted after because they were these legendary things were suddenly kind of irrelevant. And then Stormblood happened, and the same thing happened again. Admittedly, that was through Eureka, so it was a little different, but you see the point is that progression system is you build up everything within the lore of this actual main area of the game, and then every expansion you need to add something better. So all of that lore becomes completely pointless and irrelevant because it almost feels like it's not true. And everything that's special from a lore point of view of those weapons is just gone. That's why I really like what they do with Shadowbringers, because yes, it's still lore in the world, however they are resistance weapons. They are not relic weapons, they are not historical things in terms of relics. I mean, they're historical weapons, but they're not called relic weapons, they are called resistance weapons. You're making weapons for the Bozjan resistance. Therefore, while they are based on historical weapons, they are new ones. They are not the historical weapons themselves. And because of that, you can create new ones, you can create more expensive, more powerful, better weapons over time because you are inspired by the history. You are not renovating the history and then suddenly finding something better. Another really cool thing about Bozja and the whole storyline is that obviously there's things like Gabranth and the other parts of the Garlean Empire, and we learn all this cool stuff about the world that we didn't already know, and we get to expand more. We got to learn about the actual Bozjan Southern Front, and the history of what happened to the city of Bozja and the nation. We got to learn more about Dalamud, that wonderful thing up in the sky that everyone was so terrified about for obvious reasons. And because of all of that, the lore of the game felt richer. We got more backstory, got more history. And I eat that stuff up, if I'm honest. I love that sort of stuff. So the fact that we can then, through this sort of content and through this storyline, we can actually explore more of Hydaelyn, not specifically Eorzea, but Hydaelyn, I think that's a great positive in my opinion. For example, we can see how Garlemald in general is dealing with what happened with Xenos. I mean, we know that Xenos has basically ruined the entire empire at this point, especially the capital. So we can see from their point of view what's going on at this point, because it's got to be in disarray, but are they still fighting to keep the areas that they control? Are they completely all over the place and out of control? What's going on? I would like to know this. And I say Bozjan storyline, the storyline regarding the characters in Bozja is a great way for us to see that. Another rather small point to make is from a leveling perspective. Obviously, we're going to be going from level 80 to level 90. That gap is going to be bridged by the MSQ for our main class. That's the way it's going to be. But we are going to have alternative classes and secondary classes that we're going to want to level as well. For example, I'm going to go through as a dancer, but then I'm going to want to get my gunbreaker up, I'm going to want to get my red mage, and probably my white mage at this point as well. And at least at the moment, if you don't know, Bozja gives a really good way of getting levels up, because, for example, critical engagements give you 10% of a level for each critical engagement you do. And if you get on a farming train, if you happen to be lucky to get there at the right time and get on a train that's just going through all of them, you'll get critical engagements constantly and you'll just level up like mad. It's a really, really good way of doing it. So having that, or at least something similar to that, and that style of content in Endwalker is going to make it a lot easier and continue the sort of alt-friendly nature of FF14 that people know about. So we should probably keep it in there and expand on it, honestly. Following on from the last point is practicing the classes that you're getting and that you're leveling up. A good example for me personally is with White Mage. I mentioned that I kind of want to get that leveled up and keep it leveled now. Up until recently, that was never going to be the case. My plan was to get White Mage to 80 and then just leave it. Done, dusted, got my role quest done, finished, never touching healing again. Because I had serious healer anxiety. And yet going into Bozja, because it syncs you up to 80, and you get to experience all of the different skills at 80, I started feeling a lot more comfortable with it, to the point where I've actually ended up healing things like Castrum Lacus Latour. I've healed dungeons again now when I was actually terrified to do it. I found that I'm enjoying healer so much so that I've actually started doing Palace of the Dead solo on a white mage, because apparently I hate myself, but this is what I'm doing now. And all of that has happened because going into Bozja and playing a white mage in there, where you don't feel quite as, let's say, what's the best way of explaining this? In a dungeon, you kind of feel like all eyes are on you because there's only 4 of you. There is one tank, one healer, 4 DPS? No, 2 DPS. I can count, honestly. And because of that, if you make a mistake as a healer, all eyes are on you. Everyone knows it was you, everyone knows what happened. In Bozja, you go into a critical engagement, there's up to 48 people. A lot of them are going to be healers, so if something doesn't quite go right, you're less likely to feel like it's your fault. Or you're less likely to get called out for it too much. And so you get this healer anxiety just seems to slowly dissipate into nothingness. And having that in Endwalker, when we get even more skills, is probably going to be a really good thing. The last thing, again, is kind of a personal one. I want to talk about Ivalice specifically. Now, I adore the world of Ivalice. Final Fantasy Tactics is my favourite single-player Final Fantasy game, the only game in the series that I like more than it is 14 itself. 12 is a wonderful game. Vagrant Story, even if it's not specifically a Final Fantasy game, is set in Ivalice, and again, wonderful game, story, lore, everything's amazing. Ivalice is a wonderful world. However, hearing, for example, I listen to the Aetherite Radio podcast, and I know some of the guys on there they've actually specifically said they don't want an Ivalice MMO. I can kind of understand that, because it's nice having Eorzea, Hydaelyn and things as its own world, away from and detached from everything else. However, for those of us who want more Ivalice content, having the side content like the Bozja and Southern Front and things is a great way to do it, because that is all Ivalice. Like, Bozja and Southern Front is massively FF12. I mean, we all know that you can get the FF12 mount. We know that certain characters, I won't say who, but certain characters from FF12 actually appear in it. Gabranth himself, the main enemy, is a reference and a kind of modification of a character in 12. So there's a whole Ivalice thing there. You have to go through the Ivalice raids to even unlock it to begin with, so then there's that as well. And it's all of this Ivalice content, but it's separate from the MSQ. It's separate from the main game. It's optional content. So for those of us like me who actually want that stuff, we can go and have it. We can just go, we can enjoy it as much as we want. I spend loads of time in Bozja. I love Bozja. Probably because of the Ivalice stuff, partly. But for those of us who don't want anything to do with Ivalice or don't want that much of it, it's not mandatory. And that's great. It's the best of both worlds in that sense, so why not have more of it, you know? But in the end, obviously, this is all my opinion. I mean, that's basically what this channel is me just talking and saying my opinions of the game and things that I want, things that I think could be better, things that I don't think. I'm just an opinionated little guy on the internet, so hopefully you enjoyed that. If you did, you can always come and check me out on Twitch and come and have a chat about all things Eorzea, Hydaelyn, Ivalice, Bozja, FF14 in general. You'll find a link in the description below. But at the very least, I hope you enjoyed this enough to like, share and subscribe. And all that's left for me to say as always is bye.